Hello, everyone.
There we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Life Aligned Academy. I'm your host, Tristan Storm, and I'm super excited for today's guest. We have Thomas, the self talker, and our topic is so deliciously yummy today. So stay tuned. Welcome, Thomas. Thanks so much for being here.
So much for having me. Thank you for reaching out and valuing what I can say to your platform. I appreciate that.
Woohoo! Yes, me too. So I know that most people ask the question, tell me about yourself, who are you? But I think we're both in kind of agreement that we're always becoming different versions of ourselves. So for me, a more interesting question is what has made you so passionate about helping people overcome their fear of rejection and step into their authentic selves? Like, what is that? Yeah, tell me a little bit about how you got there, why it's important to you. Just want to kind of understand you a little bit better.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'm going to take it back a little bit in my childhood, I think, to understand that. For a very long time, when I was from 7 to pretty much 15, I started to get bullied in school. I started to have a lot of kids, who would something that happens, with certain kids in school is that there is a desire to show your authority among your friends in order to find respect and to evaluate you. For that, young kids, they often choose a victim. I was that victim for many years. And I got to experience what it's like to having to isolate yourself so you're not facing those mistreatments. You're not facing those moments in which you realize that you can't connect with people and that people try to get something from you, to a point where even when people start to come love and to be like, hey, we can be friends, your trust has completely gone. And it's very hard to build that up. It takes time. And eventually I did. And I remember that when I realized that I could change myself and I could start to connect again with people and to feel okay, to share who I was with them, and also to listen to them, I I realized that the pain that I faced by being so alone and by also having some mistreatments. I'm not sure if it's correct English words, but physical abuse
Mistreated.
that appear from 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 the teachers who slap you in the face because you're not doing well your homework. When you go back home, you can't even communicate that with your family because well, your dad does the same because he's not happy with your marks, and you can't even go to your mother because also sometimes your mother bursts into anger and she also slaps you. So you don't feel safe in school. You don't really feel safe at home. So the decision that you take is like, well, I either want to reproduce that on people so I can gain some power, so people can feel exactly how I felt, or I realize I really don't want anyone who faces the same struggles. And so as I started to grow and to become an adult and to realize, to become self-aware, to observe my thoughts and to observe exactly what's going on inside of me and all those crazy unconscious patterns, I realized that, wow, the fear that I have to be rejected by people is so massive, and I'm judging myself so fucking much from that I want to allow myself to express that process so the people who experience the same thing don't feel that they are alone. Because whatever problem that we face in the world, there is always someone who is experiencing the same thing. And how liberating it feels when we have a space in an environment where we have people that share about the same stuff, the same type of shit that we're facing, and we're like, oh my god, I thought I was alone. I thought I was literally alone. I didn't even know how I could express those words onto my pain. And it seems like you're going through the same pain and you're able to articulate that and you're fine about yourself with that. So it allows me to feel freer because I realize someone has gone through the same thing and it's okay. So I decided that I could share my process in regard to that because I'm like, wow, I can help people. I can do something.
Woo! I so deeply, deeply resonate to what you said there. Also, the bit of bullying background, unstable parents, and just not really knowing what a safe space feels like. I think that's definitely why I do what I do as well, is to provide a container for people to be like, hey, we're human beings, and it's messy being a human, and it's okay.
Mm.
And I think there's something it's such a gift to kind of offer the world to just be like, hey, you're safe, like to be yourself, to be that, yeah. unfiltered, a little bit just human, right? So today's topic, we're going to be talking about how the self-awareness, sort of self-awareness, which is really one of the most fundamental tools to becoming more conscious, right? In relation to the world, how we show up in the world. But sometimes, and that's kind of what we're going to be unpacking today, is how how does self-awareness kind of get in the way of being, feeling human, right? So for you, when you hear the word self-awareness, what comes to mind? What is your sort of definition or interpretation of self-awareness? Like, how would you describe it?
Yeah, it's a good thing to describe it because I'm not sure about who is your audience, but I think it's nice to have a definition from which we can have the same ground upon. Self-awareness is the ability to recognize yourself as a separate entity from the rest of the environment and from the rest of the people that you consider as, same species, because you realize, okay, even if I have developed a certain thinking that we have the same elements, we're coming from the same consciousness, from the same place, you and me, same consciousness. At the same time, the experience that I have, my story, my background, is unique to myself. And so when I start to observe the type of processes that I have, my thoughts, my emotions, my experiences, my unique life, I start to understand that I'm different than you. That we are the so like we are the same species, the same consciousness, from the same spirit. But I'm also an individual that's different from you. So I think that I would just
Yeah.
like lay the ground for that self awareness, and to if that's now that how does that start to be in the way of our connection? I would say that when you start to recognize that have thoughts that occur, and those thoughts and those patterns behaviors, they you to actually with I make my point here by talking a bit about childhood. When you're looking for you're looking for surviving and for getting some food from mommy, from getting some love. It's like that you have an environment in which you live. The environment to see the difference between you and Uncle Dan, let's say. Because, well, you see that mom, she's looking at you in the eye. And when she talks to Uncle Dan, she looks at so you start to realize that you human being, yourself separate from the experience. And so a thought that occurs is that there is unity, there is something, and you if
Sorry, and I mean to read on you there. Let's follow underneath, which is good. It's just a stop there.
Mhm.
Yeah. What's
uh, if that can be bothering for people, but I'm hearing a woman talking.
Mm,
Do you hear that?
it's strange. No, might be sort of in the picking up background. Let's see. Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yeah, I can hear
Clearer?
you. I, I sense that there was
Because you
a.
were going out of signal there for a second. Hi. There we go. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you very well now.
Perfect. Okay, so I love what you were saying there is this idea of even though we're the same consciousness, we're the same energy, we are different because we have these different perceptual lenses, right? How I grew up and how you grew up, your cultural nuances, the way that you perceive the world is different to the way that I perceive the world. So for you, that self-awareness is recognizing how these things are different. So I'm showing up with you, we're having this conversation, but there's this awareness of how I think, how I perceive, how you think, how you perceive, and then that ability to kind of translate that to each other. Because I also find that we kind of mind read a lot of the time. Is I think you know how what I'm thinking, right? As
Mm-hmm.
opposed to understanding how that might be different, and then
Yeah.
communicating from that space. Is I'm trying to understand your perception, understand how you see things, and then me in relation to you. Yeah,
Mm, yeah.
and
And even before, sorry, and I would even jump and say that even before we start to understand that our cultural background has shaped us to think and to perceive life differently. Like from the moment we were kids, we creating that separation from like everyone is the same and everyone is experiencing the same thing, but everything that I face that seems to be a problem, cry, when I get told that I shouldn't feel like that, that's
Yes.
your own experience. And so everyone has a life. Everyone outside is the same, has a life that's perfect, but me, what I face, no one can understand me. So that's the biggest separation that we create, even before we start to recognize that we are different on all those aspects that we were mentioning earlier. And so the problem that we face is that when we start to become more and more different than our environment. And so I make my point here is that as I'm bathing in my environment, if if I start to recognize that the way I think, I'm starting to become self-aware. I'm starting to recognize that my thoughts, my behaviors, how I speak, what I do is is not in synchronicity with my environment. What arises is probably the topic that what we what we're trying to discuss today is self-consciousness. Not to have other thoughts that come in the way judge myself because I no longer fit in the environment. Now, when we remember about what happened in the past, it's like when I'm not fitting in my environment, I start to freak out, and I because
Yeah.
because mom doesn't understand me anymore, or because how I feel and how I experience it, I'm afraid for my survival, and so I'm afraid not to get people's attention. And if I don't get my provider's attention, I don't receive that. I don't receive that food that I need. I don't receive the shelter, and I don't feel safe. So the same happens when we are adults in our environment. It's like if I'm too different than the environment in which I live in, and I start to identify that, damn, the way I think and the way I live is not inadequate for the world. I start to judge myself, and I also start to judge the environment because I can be like, well, no, I don't want to surrender to be like my. So I'm not, and so I'm not gonna fit, and so
Mm.
I become very aware of how I think and my processes. But something that comes in the way of human connections is well connections. If I start to recognize that I'm so different, but I'm in an environment in which I don't belong, it's going to be very hard for me to go towards people and to connect and to listen to them. Or because their values are very different than mine. What they talk
Mm.
is very different than mine, than my talk that I enjoy to have. So if I don't have to understand how to maybe go to the next level of adaptation and of myself beyond the observation of my internal process, my emotions, my thoughts, then I can get stuck and not be able to connect on a human level with people because that's the massive need that we all have and that we need to fulfill. It's like we need to be in a community with whom we feel because we need to relate.
Mm.
That's the human
Absolutely.
experience. And some people even say like this is the highest spiritual experience is to live here in this reality regardless the type of spiritual realms and connection to the divine that you have, and to find a way to also become human again and to understand intrinsically what it means. It goes sometimes of that connection to the spirits because the most spiritual experience is the body. It's like if
Mm.
you are all thoughts and your emotional processes, but you don't allow yourself to step into them and to communicate through what you experience as a human being, you don't relate, you don't connect, and feel very lonely. And so there
Absolutely.
is a path like that, which is very lonely for many who have awakened to a certain understanding of life, and then they go back to their family or they go back to
Yes.
environments at all, and
Yeah.
chaos because understanding there's no trust, there is no I'm
Yeah.
not going to make go towards you because you don't make the effort to go towards me. So I reject the environment and I don't fit and I don't connect and it.
Oh, oh, I that just kind of hits all the feely spots, because I think for me and my journey of self-awareness as well, it kind of gets this kind of lofty, like, okay, now I'm aware of my thoughts and my patterns and my feelings, and we speak for, like, we're speaking for those parts, like I'm describing to somebody how they've upset me or a trigger, but I'm not speaking from that space. And I think that that's really is where that disconnect happens. Like you say, is we all have that need to be heard, to be seen, to be accepted on some deep level, to have that sense of safety and belonging. And I find that, especially kind of in spiritual circles where it's all about this, super conscious and super self-aware, but how are you speaking from those parts? How are you allowing that part, like, we all have these kind of little inner characters, I like to call them the inner selves, that have needs and feelings and desires and thoughts. And I found myself kind of from this aloof, superior place, speaking on behalf of the part. But that needy little child in me wasn't voicing the anger or voicing, that wasn't okay. It was just this sort of surface level. And what I noticed was I wasn't really connecting with people. They were finding it like I'm in coach mode instead of human mode. And I think when you do this kind of work and that muscle's been strengthened, it's kind of hard to know that difference when, yes, I'm being self-aware and I'm seeing how your behavior is affecting me and my behavior is affecting you, and that's fabulous. But it's kind of one part of the puzzle. In order for us to truly connect, it's to be able to, for me, the human, speak to you, the human. And sometimes that means speaking, with a bit more passion or a bit more anger or a bit more sadness. It's kind of speaking vulnerably at the same time. What's been your experience with that? Because I feel like for so many, we understand both. So here's the part, the very disconnected, completely not aware, projecting, all of that. And then on the other hand, it's this hyper awareness. But then there can be a bit of a disconnect. So for you, what's been your experience with that? The ability to kind of speak from, not for, those parts that are feeling a certain way.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned about a story with my dad when I came back home after spending 4 years in a conscious community in Kopangan. Like the whole COVID time, I spent 4 years on an island, like very free, and I got to understand a lot of depth in regard to where we're coming from as a soul. And when I came back home, the environment that I was talking about before was completely different than my own perception. Faced the difference, a massive slap in my face, humbled me a lot because I realized all the judgment that I had about them, how they communicate, what the topics, like talking about politics, talking about people. I was like, oh, this is not how conscious I am to be superior. I thought myself to be above that. I had to recognize that I was avoiding to actually experience the emotion because that heated conversation that could occur when I went back home in family dinners and stuff like that brought up frustrations, brought up resentment, brought up injustice inside of me, and anger that I could not allow myself to communicate because I thought it was not. And so I had to recognize identifying those emotions as something that was bad and wrong because I was judging them to jump into an unconscious way of communicating their anger. I thought that anger was a problem. What actually the problem is not the emotion, the problem is how we deal with the emotion inside of us. Am I going for an unconscious reaction right here? Or am I allowing myself to step into the emotion with my conscious awareness and to speak the needs and the words that are beneath the emotion itself? And so here, what happens with that hyper consciousness or hyper awareness that you're mentioning about is like, this is a great stage because this hyper awareness allows you to step away from an unconscious
Mm.
used to have in the past, right? So you have a trigger, you have an emotion and a self-talk, and instead of going for a behavior that you created in the past, you observe that behavior and you don't go for that anymore. Great. So now you're at a stage where you have cut the entrance and the exit with a behavior, right? So the trigger, emotion, talk and the behavior that is displayed. Now, the things that I can do is to actually design a new response for me. And so if I I'm again now being stagnant with my communication because I talk with my dad or with my partner, I just feel stuck. We don't meet anymore. And I realize that then I feel a lot, but I don't know what to do with that. Well, so this is where we need to design a new response for our behaviors in our communication. It's like I need to allow myself to trust, first of all, that I've got good intentions and that I'm not here to blame my father. I'm not here to blame the person that I'm talking with. And at the same time, I'm not just stay in observation of how I feel, but I'm going to talk what that feeling wants me to talk. And what I have now that I did not have before is this conscious awareness. So it's scary because it's a new learning. It's something that we have never done before. It's like about that. You have a stage in your life in which you behaved unconsciously. You have gone through now a stage in which you have stopped all those unconscious behaviors because you're aware of them. But now you need to go into a creation of something new from the human experience, which is the emotion. So it's like I need to embody that anger right now. And I'm not going to say, Dad, I feel very angry right now. And there's part of me that says, fuck you. It's like, no, Dad, what you
Fuck
just said
you.
right now, much. Fuck, I love you, but fuck you. Because right now it's what you're saying. What happens when we allow ourselves to do that? We allow ourselves to stay very in the moment. That awareness allows us to articulate when we train ourselves to do so in the moment, to articulate our thoughts and our feelings, and to express maybe a need that I would like you to meet if you can. And
If you have the capacity to meet it. Yeah.
yeah. And that outcome, by the way, is not of your control. It's like the only thing that you can control is, okay, changing this behavior now. I'm going to utilize my emotions and I'm going to trust myself and my good heart to communicate best what I need. If the person in front of me can't meet that need, I can't control that. It's a shame. I will feel sad and I might think I did something wrong and I should never do that again. No, keep on doing that. That's just you being in your truth and in your authenticity, but you can't control the environment, right? So you're just building this experience that's amazing. You're going to face rejection. You're going to face a lot of guilt because you're going to pain a lot of people. That's okay. But at least you're stepping into a whole new version of yourself, which is much more human. Why? Because now I'm communicating my emotions. There is
So beautiful.
it's wonderful, and it's a mandatory chapter of life to learn again,
Absolutely.
realize all those emotions. I'm sure you've heard for the people who are listening, like that, there is no wrong emotions. What that means is that all of them are to be experienced, and in communication, they are also to be experienced, not just to be looked at, not just to
Yes.
be
To be worked with.
and to look at. Like I'm gonna experience that, and I'm going to experience it and communicate it so I can go through that experience with emotion, and so I can become me after expressing this emotion. Because right now it's like if I don't experience this emotion, if I don't voice that to the person with whom I'm having the conflict with, I suppress this experience to I'm rejecting my experience. I'm rejecting my emotion. I'm rejecting
Not
what
being. Yeah.
I'm not being what I'm supposed to be right now and what I can communicate, what I can translate. So yeah, I would say trust your good heart, trust your good intention. It will feel very scary because it's an exercise, it's a homework that we've never done before. If you have never done that before, it's because you have never done that before. So you need to understand who you are when you start to do that, and it feels a bit scary because it's completely unknown. But eventually you get used to it and you feel much more comfortable because repetitions makes the experience familiar. So you will feel good about yourself and you will see the ripple effect, which is beautiful.
This you've described that so beautifully, and what stands out to me is really this difference between moving from being reactive to responsive. And a lot of times I feel like as humans, we as children, like you described earlier, we feel responsible for, oh, mom's upset or dad's upset, something's going on, I feel responsible, burdened, and so I need to change my behavior because now, oh, I'm affecting them, I'm making them upset. And a huge reframe that's really altered the way that I see that is this response ability. I have this ability within me to respond to the situation, to the person. That doesn't mean that I'm responsible for how they react or how they receive me, right? But as we're moving from that kind of unconscious reaction where the emotion takes over and that part is yelling and screaming and chaos is ensuing, where we bring that into the forefront using awareness to be like, oh, this is what I'm feeling. This is what's going on for me. This is the truth of this moment. It's not going to be like that forever, but this is currently the truth of this moment. And it needs that pathway. The emotion, energy in motion, requires a pathway to move through the body. And so, what I'm hearing you say is that ability to kind of be in the emotion, with the emotion, experiencing it, and giving it voice, and that's actually what creates the connection, because now I'm the anger in me is speaking to the anger or the hurt in you, and we're both having that kind of release. Because I've definitely found in the past, that unconscious explosion. So my pattern was, I thought it was really ugly to express anger. I had a real block towards anger. It was ugly, it was volatile, it wasn't safe to be angry. So I had to be very level and very filtered, and I had to express myself in this really kind of grown up way from a young age. And what happened was that part of me that felt fucking furious fragmented and kind of took over and had a little life of her own. So she would just have these tantrums. I'd be completely unaware of how to hold her, and then feel obviously terribly guilty because now she's exploded all over the place. And when I recognized that this part is so valid and important and lovable, and gave her that space to be there, like it's okay to be angry, it's okay to express the boundary, exactly as you said, now she's able to speak from that place of, this is making me feel like a fire pit in my stomach is moving through my body, and really don't like what she said. And then the other person has the opportunity to either acknowledge the experience, how I'm feeling, or express themselves. And even if it's a bit complicated and a bit tricky, there's that moment of, we can meet each other. And if we can't, that's okay. It doesn't mean that my need isn't valid. It just means you can't hold it. What for you, like, I get so curious about these kind of more shadow aspects. What's a character in you, like a little part of yourself that you feel like you never really gave much space to, and as you started to become more aware, maybe that part has actually been really, because I feel like each of the parts we reject have a gift. And so as I rejected my anger, I rejected my assertiveness, my ability to stay firm and be like, no, that's not okay for me. And so people would walk all over me and, disrespect me, because again, I was rejecting anger, so I was rejecting assertiveness. So what's a kind of character for you that you found, more interesting and maybe was scary to meet? Because I think a lot of people are afraid to meet these parts because they feel like they're going to take over and.
Right. I would say that it was the Joker side of me.
Oh,
As a kid, I loved to make people laugh. I love to take the space in a room, in a meeting, and to jokes, so I could make people laugh. Because I realized that, well, I didn't realize that consciously at the time, but I really wanted like, a nice vibe, a great energy in which people can relax into. And I've kind of pushed away that fun aspect of my, especially when I started to look at life more in a more serious manner, and to look at the background of what spirituality can unravel, and to be like, okay, so I need to be conscious, and so in that consciousness, it's like the fun part. Although the belief that I had was like, well, the idea is to go back to the kid that you. I was like, well, where is the fun, bro? You forgot to be a
yeah,
joker.
taking it a bit seriously.
So I did push that away for a long time, until until I realized that this part was actually allowing me to take some space and to even talk in a more light way. Like for you right now, when the interview that we're having right now, I'm talking in a light way. I'm just communicating my thoughts. My thoughts are serious, but I don't need to be super serious like I used to. And so to tap into this character allowed me to feel more light about everything, to talk about serious stuff without being emotional or dragging the energy down. Instead, I could just be light, and exchange information, and that works too. And that gave me so much more enthusiasm in my life. I got to appreciate so much more what it is like to create a bridge between seriousness and lightness, and to utilize that in my voice. And that
Mm,
really that's the first character that I think of, because it really was a big one. Really, really was a big one.
mm. And I think that's, for so many people, it's that I definitely have that same program of don't take up too much space, like you're a kid, be quiet, be over there, don't take up too much space. I also was very like playful, high energy. I'd walk up to people and be like, hello, let's be friends. And I think as we grow up, that light gets, you get told enough times to be small, to be quiet, to, oh, you're stealing the center, you're taking too much attention. And again, that part is there and it's so valuable, but when it's integrated, and I think that this is such a key point in what we're talking about today, is when self-awareness is embodied and integrated, like you said there earlier, you kind of get to modulate it a little bit instead of it being this extreme high intensity part of you that's now trying to take the attention because it's not allowed to. That's, for me, I see it as like when that part fragments, it becomes like there's a distortion that happens. When it's allowed to be there, you get to play with it. So like for you, the part of that's able to be fun, you can shift between, being serious, making a point, but with that energy of lightness. Whereas when we don't really give ourselves permission to embody that character, I find that that's actually, yeah, where all the things we're afraid of happening, like, oh, somebody's going to see me as arrogant because now I'm taking up space, right? Actually, when I'm okay with that part being there, it's people, it's interesting, people's perception changes as well, because you're holding that part in a light way, but you're taking him seriously as well because he's got cool stuff to say, and you're
Mhm.
giving him a platform to speak it, right? And I feel like that then translates, this, the word authenticity is kind of a buzzword at the moment, but like really at the heart of it is just that, like, I'm okay with these parts being here, like, and I'm holding them and they can be received in that. I feel like people find it so refreshing when you can kind of hold those parts, because for most of us we struggle with different aspects of ourselves. So for me, that like ability to integrate it is that authentic expression. Is I can take up space sometimes and I can shy away from it. And as I hold both, now you can play with them and you can modulate. It's kind of like you've got the remote control to change the volume.
Thing is like the flexibility of our thinking to permit ourselves to dive into those parts is everything.
Yes.
And it appears the connections are being made because there is no judgment in between. If I become too much, and that's the risk of staying too much in the observation. It's like
Yes.
I identify so much myself to observing like that of me, all those emotions, all those things that I would want to say, that I don't participate in life anymore, because all the life is happening within those parts, but I'm just like observing them. So I'm great at,
Oh, hello.
but I
Yeah.
don't know how to how to communicate from that. I don't know how to communicate. And something that's very good to think of is, especially I'm sure the people here, they you just don't think about yourself. You also think about the people around you and the next generations, right? So if you think about that, if if like, think about your parents, mate. What do you think your parents type of relationship? What is the quality of their relationship that they had with all those different characters inside of them when they raised you? Because it's more likely that if you got behaviors from very scary, that didn't allow you to feel safe because maybe they threatened you, maybe they displayed a lot of anger because you put the food on the, because maybe you were, because you didn't bring good marks. All those characters inside of them that they didn't know how, because also they lacked self-observation, but they also didn't know how to embody those different parts that you enable them to activate. Well, they rejected those parts inside of you when you grew up, which is why they told you what you're feeling right now.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Or you're being too much right now. If you're taking too much space, it's like, well, this kid is in need of attention, So they you project. If you want to have kids, or if you have kids, or if you think of the next generation, it's like you really want to appreciate all the parts that scream for your attention and for your embodiment. Because if you don't do that, you're gonna have your kids that are gonna reflect this scarcity, and you're gonna project your shit unconsciously. Or you might know the concept of it, but you don't actually do the work on yourself. So you're gonna want them to change, because who they're gonna be is a highest version of yourself, of expression, that they naturally have, and they don't have limitations. But the limitations that we put upon ourselves, that's the one that we create in our education, in the education that we give to people. So
Mm, mm,
not
mm.
that for ourselves, but that for the people around us. And if it's not, if you're like, well, I don't want to have kids, it's like, well, your embodiment of yourself affects already the circle that you are around with. People around you, they get affected by your freedom and by your ability to express yourself in this shade, and to feel free like that, and to observe that you're judging yourself and be like, oh, okay, I was about to judge myself. Well, I'm just gonna flow still with what's going on right here, because I don't want to stuck myself. I don't want to
Mm.
get stuck, and I don't want people to also feel stuck around me, because if you are, which everyone is, if you are a leader around you to a certain extent, the people who look up to you, they they are defined by your container, the container that you put around your own self-worth, your own freedom that you have acquired. So the more you get to open up this container and to find freedom in all your imperfections, and to
Yes.
look at mistakes and to be like, those are great lessons that I can learn about myself. It's not easy, but it's so important, because the people then, they
Mm.
can be, what I
I
was
can do
mentioning,
that too. Yeah.
I can allow myself to also be free here. Oh, great. I'm not alone.
Yeah. It's permission. What you said there earlier, I have two kids. I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. And it is so fascinating how you meet your mirror in ways that you never ever thought possible. Like my daughter really reflects to me that part that is the opposite. She's so free, she's so creative, she's so herself, and it's like it is magnificent to behold. And I find that the trigger that comes up for me is because the permission, I never had that permission to be free as a child. And so it's interesting, I've observed this part that feels jealous when she's expressing herself. And obviously, thanks to the self awareness, I'm able to kind of catch it and notice it, feel it in my body. And it's been so fascinating because it's like her, instead of me squishing it and telling her to like tone it down, I'm almost reteaching that part of me to feel free again. And it's amazing because they're out like such great little teachers. And my son, he's, sometimes he gets into the Eeyore, where he like wants to talk about the sort of darkness in the world. And because I identify as being very light and seeing the positive sometimes to my own detriment, he kind of is that reminder that it's like it's kind of fun to go into the or a little bit and like feel a little sorry for yourself, but like that's okay as well. And so this contrast, and I think like what you said, whether it's through the audience listening, whether it's through your children, whether it's through your parents, whether it's just through your community, we're kind of meeting these parts of ourselves. And I often find that the parts that trigger us the most in other people, like for me, seeing an aggressive male, like showing their dominance, or a bully, I'd react so intensely to it. but then really allowing myself to meet the bully within me and understand it and understand how I assert power allowed me to, again, that integration of, okay, I can assert power when I need to, but I don't, it's not coming from insecurity, right? It's coming from a space of like, okay, I'm feeling a bit insecure. I can assert myself. And
Mm.
so, yeah, using kind of the world around us as well, that awareness is in relation to you. It's not just me in my little bubble. It's me in relation to you, how you trigger me, how you affect me, and how I do the same. I find this is part of that being that we talk about. It's not just this intellectualization of, "Ooh, look here, I know my thoughts and my feelings." It's, yeah, dropping that judgment. And like what you said earlier, for me, the biggest word that comes through is being curious instead of judgmental. Because that curious is kind of, it opens the floodgates to kind of meet those parts. And yes, it's scary because it's the unknown. And as humans, we like to take the path that's, well walked. We like to go where it's familiar. And this kind of work really does require us to step into uncharted territories. But when we do that curiously instead of judgmentally, it's like that childlike wonder of like, ooh, I was a, bit mean there. I was a bit of a dick, or, like really, and kind of having a bit of sense of humor to those parts as well, I find has been hugely, hugely beneficial just sort of in my own integration process. What are some ways that you feel have really helped you to embody that sense of freedom? Like you said, it gives permission to other people to do the same, but obviously you're human as well, and there's parts that maybe we feel a little shy of. What's really helped you to kind of just hold yourness and everything that that contains?
Well, first, thanks for sharing with your daughter. That's nice for the parents who are listening here. I'm not a parent myself just yet, but it's so
Just
nice
yet.
to so nice. Yeah, just yet. It's very nice to hear your nice reflection upon that behavior. Well, along the way of what you were saying, I was thinking of something that goes, okay, this is going to be my answer to your question. What allows me more free to share myself and to share my story? I think it was to realize that I had identified myself so much with the knowledge that I believed a little bit too much that I knew a lot of things. And that has been a killer in the exploration of life for newness, because I thought that what I knew was already perfect. And so
Yeah.
then there's so much comparison. And then, according to the environment we're talking about, it's like the people in my environment, I think I'm better than them. I think that I think that I have experienced so, and I'm a god right now.
I'm awakened. Yeah.
Exactly. Like it's the vocabulary in and the language in life can be extremely manipulative. And I don't want to say that it has been designed to manipulate the human mind for them to develop a spiritual ego that's massive. But what I'm saying is that we need to be very careful for the moment where we start to think we are better than the others, that we are better than the people who were born before us, that we are better than the next generations, because we're like, oh, now the kids are so dumb because I spend all this time on social media. To humble yourself and to realize that you are as limited as they are in some variations. But I mean, everyone has going through so many complicated situations that we've all overcame. It's like your experience is massive. If you're 45, your experience of life is massive. If you're 60, your experience of life is massive. Whether or not you know how to express that with your words and to beautifully share your story or not, you have gone through so much. And so we have a lot to teach from each other's. And I think the people who don't know how to articulate well those thoughts that we are self-aware of, we kind of think that they don't know as much. But when we do allow ourselves to give a space for those people, we understand that we've got a lot to learn from them. So to become okay with me being life again and a student of all the people that I was judging, a student of my parents, a student of my family, of my friends, I was like, wow, I really get to learn a lot about myself from you, and I did not know I could see that. So then curiosity awakens because you're like, wow, I don't need to judge you anymore. And uh, when I agreed to myself that I could learn from anyone,
Yes.
and that wasn't just like an idea, but I was like, I'm actually learning so much by having a conversation, by listening to your story. It's immense. You learn so much about yourself when you give space for people to be beautiful in your eyes, and it's something that we change inside of us. It's not they have nothing to do about that. It's inside of us. Like change the way you look at people, see them as beautiful, and you're gonna learn about life and about yourself. So
Mm,
yeah, becoming a student of life has changed my life again, and to be like, okay, then I can share my story. Who fucking cares? I'm not perfect.
mm,
Not perfect.
mm.
We help each other.
Mm, that is such a yummy answer because I think that's kind of what happens is, and this is again just kind of reiterating the theme here is when we have the self awareness that feels like it's above and it's coming from that judgment, we really, really limit ourselves, like you said, to sort of learn from anybody, from any walk of life, from any generational background, from any societal background, because we think that we're better than them, you know? And actually, for me, just sort of on what you were saying, is I've learned to just ask really beautiful questions. And what that does is it's again, that's that connection point. So okay, I know that there's something I can learn from you. So it's up to me then to work on my communication. Because when I come with judgment, there's this block. You're gonna be defensive, you're gonna be guarded, you're gonna be closed, and then that's triggering. And now we've disconnected versus how can I connect with this person? What about them? Like, what do I find interesting? What questions can I ask that opens up? And I think at the heart of every single person, they just want to be seen. They want to be like, for somebody to be curious about them. And it's been the most amazing thing. Like, I've got clients that range, from 13 to 65, and that ability to connect with anybody, like you said, you're a student constantly learning. And I feel like there's just this beautiful humbleness in that, right? Because instead of, oh, look how self-aware I am now, I'm superior and I'm enlightened and I've had my spiritual enlightenment, what does that really mean, right? If we're always evolving, always expanding, then there's always more to know. And so humility, curiosity, and that kind of acceptance of everybody, finding, like you said, kind of when I can see this part as beautiful, like I see that aggressive man that I used to feel so triggered by, and I kind of see the little baby in him, and I'm like, oh, now I can speak to that part. And it's amazing how quickly people drop their defenses and their guards and all their armor, and you just get to see the person and have that real heart to heart. And that's where I feel like the self-awareness, when integrated, allows us to be really be human, and everything that kind of contains.
Yeah, because you become related, and people relate.
Absolutely.
People relate on stories, and
Yeah.
I've got a story actually, like to show the judgments that I had towards a very good friend of mine. I participated in 2019 in a retreat, and this man, he was from Bangkok, he was from Thailand. I was in Thailand myself in that retreat, and this dude is like, he's he's exactly as you mentioned. He is curious. He asks questions, and he's asking for support. And he shares his story in such almost an innocent way that when I first met him, I was like, I'm not scared of that dude. He's not afraid. I'm like, I'm so much better than him. He's inoffensive. He's not a danger. And as a male perspective, but we all have that thoughts inside. It's like, if you're not a threat, it's like, we can talk. I might think that I'm a bit superior than you are, but I might enjoy actually this innocence that you give me because you seem to be so free of judgment. And it's like, you don't know if it's this person is enlightened, or you don't know if this person doesn't know anything. It's like, it's either enlightenment or ignorance,
Ignorance. Yes.
right? I was like, I think he's ignorant. That was just me, like, judging him.
Judging.
And I think you're way too innocent to be wise. And about that. And the point of that story, I lost the point. Oh yeah. Um, when I started to realize that actually this man was extremely successful, he had built a whole company, he had made millions, and other friends were like, I mean, he's super famous in Thailand. I was like, wait, what? You know,
What?
first to see how someone so innocent, like this person was a child in my eyes, because he was embodying the quality of a child. He was curious. He was sharing himself like an open book, and he was asking for advices and support. He was asking for questions to learn more about life and about himself. And I realized that, wow, actually, this little boy that I was judging is actually a man. And I was like, bro, you've been judging someone that now is so inspiring to you. Why? Because you're evaluating your worth with the success that you have about yourself. That's a big mistake that I had made. I was like, wow, that's a big slap in my face. He was already beautiful and a successful human being before I knew he had created his business and he was a millionaire. But the moment that I started to look at him and to be like, oh, he has what I
Wow.
want.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's behaving like that. I was like, what if actually it's his curiosity, it's his openness to ask for support that actually made him who I who I want to become. It's all those qualities that allowed him to have a community around him of people who are comfortable around him, and they get to relate with his story because he has him around it, and he's extremely inspiring. And I was like,
Mm,
wow, that was a beautiful lesson of life, because I realized how much I was projecting my own desires and standards about what a man should look like. And I was filtering and not being able to see a real man in front of me because of the judgments that I had about myself, not to be that man just yet. And when I started to change that, I was like, wow, okay, so I'm definitely going to become more curious for the sake of making more money, just for the sake of appreciating more life and to remove myself from the cage of judgment that I constructed. Because I don't want to be thinking that I'm supposed to be something else in order to embrace life. I don't know everything, and I can ask questions.
mm,
I can relate on a very humble level, and I don't need to show all my knowledge to the world in order to be validated. It's like I already know what I know to a point, but I have no idea of what I don't know. So I'm gonna ask. So I
yeah.
think this that you're talking about is that it's like knowledge what you know, talk about what you know, so you actually feel embodied, and for the rest, ask questions.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no stupid question. And when we're kids in class putting our hands up, I think that message, we get that message that it's, oh, I'm going to be embarrassed if I ask this question. I love that story that you just shared, because I think we can all relate to that. I think we all have that person that we've misjudged, and recognizing, when I hear the word enlightenment, or I think of the word enlightenment, we see all this, what it's supposed to look like, and there's a lot of spiritual ego in that. And actually, if we break down the word enlightenment, it's just that lightness of being, right? Of, I'm not going to take, like, I don't have to take myself seriously or prove my knowledge or my how interesting I am, or there's just a sense of lightness. And yeah, for me, that's kind of, that's the goal, right? Is to just lighten the being and drop. You said the word shame earlier, and I feel like a lot of the work, this work is unraveling that shame, because shame makes us want to hide parts of ourselves. Is, oh, I have skeletons in my closet, I don't want you to see that, and so I'm masking. And the more okay we become with those parts, it's kind of like we open up the cupboard and the skeletons can kind of fall out, and we're like, ha, there's a skeleton, there's one. There isn't that sense, like, we don't have to hide anything, we get to just kind of be. And if there is a judgment, because there will be, that's okay,
Mhm.
because you're no longer judging those parts. And I feel like that's maybe one of the most challenging parts is to start to accept and become okay with the parts that feel unacceptable, the parts that feel unlovable, the parts that feel like we're scared of even. There's kind of parts of me like becoming a mom, the part that could like protect my child at all costs, like the lioness, mama bear, like that part terrified me. And actually, like finding ways to train that part and be like, I wanna be able to feel comfortable with that instead of afraid of that power. There's something, yeah, and that's a continuous work, like you said. Just stay open, stay humble, stay curious, and I feel like a good kind of question to ask ourselves is, does this self-awareness, is it making me feel separate from, or is it making me feel part of? And that's, I feel like, really bringing us back to the human being part. Is our self-awareness integrated in this experience actually allows us to live more deeply, feel more deeply, love more openly, versus it being this thing that's now separating me from you because I know more than you, or you know more than me, and so we can't have this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we can say that it's doing both. Like self-awareness, awareness is a portal which amplifies whatever we put our attention upon. So if we are not understanding that we are amplifying more separation, well, that's exactly what's happening, and we need to find out about this separation that we self-manufacture. If we understand how to utilize this self-awareness in order to channel our attention to becoming more embodied in the moment and spontaneously live life and participate with its beauty, well, then that's what it does. So self-awareness has a power of both. It can be at your advantage or it can be a disservice, and that's for yourself and for the rest of the people. Yeah, that's something that if we have some time, I would like to jump upon, or just to say something. You mentioned about that lioness inside of you, like the power of the mother that can protect her child at all costs, and would not second about killing you if killing you is the ultimate.
Protecting my child. Yeah.
Like this is depicted so much in movies that we enjoy, and like one of the most famous one we can think of is like the superhero Hulk. Like it's the life of a man who is trying all his life to tame this ball of green anger that he has inside of him. Right, it has become a beast. The more he fears to be controlled by it, the more it appears, until the moment he realizes at some point that he can learn how to make peace with that anger, and he can utilize this anger and stay conscious in it. I think that's an amazing, beautiful metaphor for what we were talking about. This ferocious and very destructive power that we all have within us. When
Yes.
when we learn how to first of all see it and acknowledge that it's there, which is a combination of all our shadows.
Yes.
The more we
Yes.
create our shadows, the more we can consciously meet ourselves and utilize this dark power. When we can do that, we become a safe space. When we can do that, we become safe for us and safe for the people around us. And it only takes certain steps to do so, is to objectively look about ourselves, to really try to analyze our behaviors and why we create the type of situations that we create, and to look at our intentions when we create those things. Something that I do a lot with people is like to look at ourselves in the mirror and to find out all those
Yes.
things I enjoy, like all the things that I want to step away from. I don't want to be present with myself when I face an obstacle in my business. I don't want to be present in myself when I feel sad because I'm afraid to lose someone. I don't want to be present with myself when I just got when I froze because I had a conversation with a friend and he said something that didn't please me. So I step away and I want to isolate myself. Like all those little behaviors that we have, we must be in peace with that, accept that this is part of us, and to appreciate the other side of the coins that it provides us with, which is an immense transformative energy,
Mm.
transforming the light by.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. I love that you used that metaphor specifically because the Hulk is so I've met that part of myself. So when I get really angry, like my kids are, pressing all my buttons, my mom used to smack me, like we were talking about earlier, kind of just that slap, it's like she couldn't control her inner beast. And I can feel that urge. And the identification was literally like the Hulk, and I'd feel this green coming up, my fists would ball, and I'd feel the green coming over. And there'd be moments that it would take over. I'd yell. I managed to never ever smack my children or anything like, but then I'd yell and I'd feel that, and then I'd be able to recognize it and kind of soften to it. Like, okay, I understand that beast, and we all have that, right? Is that the part that feels so uncontrollable? And I find that, again, like, that metaphor is so apt, and it's just so beautiful that you brought that up, because it's almost in the wanting to control it that, like I said, kind of it fragments, and it then takes on a life of its own, and that's where the distortion or the ugliness happens. But actually, when we honor it, it's like there is this beast inside that's there to protect myself in situations that I feel unsafe or I feel out of control, but also to protect, others or people around me. And accepting it and being like, okay, it's here. Now, how do I train that? Because I am responsible. I am responsible to that part, right? I don't want to inflict hurt or cause chaos. So I am responsible to train that part of me and to work with that part of me, to not to tame it or control it in that sense, but to work with it. It's kind of like becoming the dragon rider, right? Like, here's this powerful beast, and I want to learn to synchronize with it so that we can work together as a team, because there's the gift in it, to be able to, like I said, with that assertiveness or protection or whatever it is. But there's that, that ability to take responsibility for those shadow parts instead of just letting them spill and affect other people in a negative way. So love that you use that, because I think everybody can relate to that story. Like we said, everyone relates to stories, to those metaphors. And so I think a question to kind of maybe leave the audience with as well is looking at those parts in yourself that feel scary or feel, and you mentioned working with the mirror. So kind of using mirror work to be like, okay, hello, myself. What are the parts that I want to hide from? Because if I'm wanting to hide from those parts, then I definitely don't want the world to see them or other people to see them. And how can I start to, what would the gift be? So for me, that, like, the beast part, the part that could kill or destroy, it was so like, no, I'm a lady. I won't let that part out. And actually being able to meet it and train it. So, like, for me, it was the permission slip was jiu-jitsu. Training Brazilian jiu-jitsu is my way of understanding that part and sharpening the tool. So, what is that part in you that feels unacceptable, unlovable, or even scary? And what would the gift be if you were to integrate it? If you were to be not just aware, but embodied with it, what gift, what strengths would that kind of give? Is there anything else you kind of want to add to what we were talking about? Just to kind of, I mean, I could carry on speaking for eternity on this subject, but yeah, is there anything you kind of want to add, or a little tool or a tip that you want to share with audience to, yeah, to just kind of punctuate this topic that we've been talking about?
Mm-hmm. What comes to mind? Well, I've got two things that comes to mind. It's like there's another story that I can share about that, but I think it's gonna be too long. Like another story of a hero whom have been created a beast inside of him from his parents, and it's a beautiful story. It's like it's an animation. It's a manga, and it's just another metaphor, a bit more complex to express how the beast that we have inside of us is created from our childhood and past lives. So we carry all that stuff, and then we develop it, and then eventually we realize that I've been caging this beast inside of me for so long, and I need to open the gate and shake his hands and be like, "Hey, I have stopped you to feel free because I thought you were a threat. Well, actually, now I understand that you are a power within me that I must collaborate with. Something that I can give for people is, well, first of all, an advice to say, like, be very gentle. Be very gentle on yourself and learn how to be compassionate to with your process, because it's a long journey. It's a process that always unfolds. And wherever you are in your life right now, it's like when you feel good, you might think that you have all figured it out. But you know
Yes.
that in a couple of days, when shit is going to hit the fan again, you're going to be looking at yourself and be like, oh my God, what is my
Why?
existence? What is my value that I give to the world? So it's a constant process that keeps on occurring again and again, to learn how to really go with the experience of shame and judgments that you have about yourself, because you really can't find the worth and the love and the support for yourself in that moment. It's like, be very, very aware of that opportunity to be with yourself, however hard it is. And then it's like you
Mm,
take everything from the day. It's like days are filled with wonderful golden bits, which
yes.
allows yourself. So it's like whatever practice you have, it's like meditation, jujitsu, mirror work. You have you are already in connection with certain things that resonate in your field. So keep on doing that and keep on having an open heart, having an open mind. Reach out and get some support by people who understand and who are going either on the same level or a little bit above, so they can really give you nice advices for you to feel safe, for you to feel again that you're fitting in your environment and that you're not alone.
Mm,
And then, according to where you're at, it's like you might add some stuff. So yeah, definitely, middle work, which is something that I do, is massive. Like if you learn how to open up your voice and talk to yourself and give yourself a validation that you could not give before, that's one of the first things that you need to get. It's like, validate your experience, validate everything that you experience. If you have the emotion, it means because there is a reason. So validate that reason, validate why. So become rational about, why do I even have this emotion now arising? So you can understand yourself
mm,
better, you can understand your experience, and you can find out some little things that you might want to tweak, some things that you have to accept about yourself because you can't control and you can't change it, and something that you can change. So you need to take responsibility for you to develop yourself in that way.
so delicious. Thank you. I just sort of what you said there. I feel like when we stop rejecting those parts of ourselves, then rejection from others isn't as scary. It's kind of like when we're rejecting or being hard on those parts, it's 10 times more scary if you then validate my own rejection,
Right.
as opposed to like kind of leaning in gently and being like, okay, here's an uncomfortable part of myself, and recognizing, because I think that's especially with the spiritual awakening kind of energy, is we have this clarity and this aha moment, or we do a course or we do something that feels so like such a big shift. But we are cyclical beings, and you're going to have an up, you're going to have a down, you're going to have a winter, you're going to have a summer. How to be able to meet yourself with that gentleness that you speak of in all those seasons, I feel like that's really so beautiful, because often it's that high of like, oh, now I'm self-aware and I should always be self-aware, and then I have my Hulk moment and I become unconscious for a second, and then we kind of beat ourselves up, as opposed to going, okay, what can I learn from that experience? So I lost my temper there, or that person triggered the fuck out of me. What can I learn from that? And see it as this ever evolving process, versus needing it to be like kind of just dropping this idea of getting it right or being perfect, because being human is messy, right? Like without any of the fluff or the bullshit, like if we really just get really honest, it's messy, it's up and down, it's dynamic. It's never going to be like, oh, okay, I've reached enlightenment and now I'm like fully zen, because that would be boring. Like we're here to experience life and all of that, right? So thank you so much for showing up here today, and just I've messaged a lot of people on Instagram and say, hey, do you want a message? And I never get you want to chat, and I never get messages back. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So I just appreciate your, yeah, just showing up here, your openness to just have a conversation with a complete random stranger from the other side of the world. And yeah, I just really valued everything you had to share and say today. So, so, so valuable. Where can people find you if, people resonated with your perspective and what you've shared? Where can they find you? Yeah, how do people get in touch with you?
Also, you can find me on Instagram as a self-talker with the little bar in between each word. And there you have you have my link tree, so you can click on that and you can find the services that I have. And I have a membership that starts in September, and this membership offers many things. One of the first main program that we have is to take our power back. So everything that we talked about today is to learn how to convey our emotions in communication spontaneously, so we don't need to step back and then reflect and then come back, and to allow ourselves to naturally just flow with that. It's
Mm,
going to allow you to remove misunderstandings in your communication, to be much more clear and firm, and to embody at the same time of being compassionate to others. You're still respecting yourself and ask for what you want and what you don't, and you no longer
mm,
fear people's judgments, people's reaction, people's um, uh, rejection of yourself. And then we have different things, but this is going to be the main thing happening in September.
concerning.
You can also reach out to me on Thomas at theselftalker.com, which is my email address. So Thomas.
Amazing. I'll put all those links below. So yeah, if you want to reach out, please reach out. And stay tuned. This channel is really all about, yeah, getting the tools to moving out of survival mode and becoming a thriving human being. So thank you so much, everybody, for watching. We value your time so much, and I hope that you've gained some little nuggets of gold out of this conversation today. And again, thank you, Thomas, for showing up. Mwah!
I love having those wonderful chats with people. I know that it's
Yay.
helping the audience listening.
Yay. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye. 1 hour 11 minutes, by the way. Woo!
Ah. Oh, that was so